Today I am bringing you all of my thoughts on the Goodreads Choice Award nominees for 2025. This is not a reaction video. I've already looked at the list. It came out a few days ago at the time of filming this, but I still wanted to bring you my thoughts on each category. I think this year I've actually read at least one book from most of the categories, with a few exceptions, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But I wanted to bring you my predictions on who I think is going to win each category. I wanted to talk about the books that I've read, the books that are on my TBR, and all of that stuff. We're going to go in order of the categories where I've read the most books from, because I feel like that's more fun. There are 4 categories where I've read more than one book, unless you count the audiobook category, which I'm not going to, but I'll talk about that towards the end. In the mystery and thriller category, I've read 4 books, and I also DNF'd one. I DNF'd The Tenant because I got a few chapters in and realised I hated the main character and I didn't want to read a whole book about them. I also read The Crash back in January and hated that, gave it 2 stars. It's one of the worst books that I've read this year. Would not recommend the audiobook for that. The main character is pregnant and she imagines her unborn child talking to her in her mind. The voice that the narrator uses for baby Tuna it's something, I can still hear it in my mind, and I'm never going to unhear that. So yeah, will not be voting for that, won't be voting for Frida McFadden at all. She's not the author for me. She has been nominated 3 times in this category, and I don't feel like that's really a shock. I think the only reason she wasn't nominated 3 times last year is because one of her releases was a sequel, and Goodreads sometimes can be a bit weird about including sequels. I don't think she's going to win though. I know that some people have talked about why Goodreads doesn't bring in a rule where an author can only be nominated once per category, but she didn't win last year. Frida did not win last year because the vote was split between the 2 books that she had nominated, and I think the same thing is going to happen this year. I don't think she's going to win. Dan Brown and John Grisham are obviously both very recognisable authors, but I think Alice Feeney could win it this year. Beautiful Ugly has nearly 250,000 ratings. It doesn't have the highest average rating, and I think it's because the ending of this book is quite divisive. I gave it 3 stars. I really liked the first 60 to 70%. I thought the atmosphere and the isolated setting was done really well, but this book doesn't make sense. I hated the ending, obviously. I'm not going to go into it because of spoilers, but yeah, the ending actually made me angry, and the more that I think on it, the more time that's passed, the more angry I am at the ending. But yeah, I think this could win because it does have quite a big readership. The Geneva Rose book could also possibly be in the running. I think that's going to be quite high up because again, it has a big readership. I don't love domestic thrillers, which is the main reason I haven't picked this one up, but if you've read it, let me know if you think it's any good. I mean, this particular book is a sequel, but I know that the first book was pretty popular. I think what I'm going to vote for is the second Vera Wong book, Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping by Jessie Q Satanto. I loved the first book in the series, gave it 5 stars. It was one of my favourite books of last year. If there's a third book, then I will definitely be reading it. The only other book that I've read from this category is Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it has a really strong hook. It really hooks you in immediately. The plot for this follows a woman who gets a phone call, or no, the police show up at her place of work. It's her first day back after being on maternity leave, and she finds out that her husband is involved in a hostage situation in London, but he's the one that's holding people hostage. Out of all of the other books, the one that's highest on my radar is Heartwood, which I've heard is a literary mystery that follows an experienced hiker who mysteriously disappears on the Appalachian Trail in Maine. This sounds like something that I would enjoy. I do tend to like literary mysteries, and it was a literary mystery that won last year, so this could be in the running. I don't know how popular it is because up until this point I hadn't actually heard of it. Moving on to the romance category, and I have actually read 3 books in this category, which I wasn't expecting. I've read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and The Favourites by Lane Fargo. My vote would be for The Favourites because I really enjoyed it. It was almost a 5 stars, but I also don't think this should be in the romance category. I think the readership for The Favourites is more in the lines of Taylor Jenkins Reid. I mean, I'm not saying that if someone's a romance reader then they wouldn't enjoy this, but this, in my opinion, it's not a romance romance. It's about a toxic relationship between two ice skaters. It's not really romantic in my opinion. It's inspired by Wuthering Heights, which I also don't think is a romance. I feel like this category in general for the last few years has been dominated by certain authors, and I like Emily Henry. I like Ali Hazelwood. I do think the Ali Hazelwood vote is going to be split this year, so I think Abby Jimenez or Emily Henry might win it. I have obviously, like I said, I've read Great Big Beautiful Life and I enjoyed it, but I don't think it's been generally as well received in comparison to Abby Jimenez's book. From what I gather, I don't think any of these romances are between same-sex couples. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, which is also disappointing. The romance category has so much potential to be incredibly diverse because there are so many diverse romances that are being released every year. Instead, they're putting in books that aren't even romances. But anyway, that's a whole rant that we don't need to go into. A lot of the other books on this list I'm not really that interested in. I do want to read more Kennedy Ryan because I read one of her novellas a few years ago and really liked her writing, so that is on my radar. The Laurie Gilmore, that series, I can't remember what it's called, the Dream Harbour series, no interest in reading that because I've read another book by this author but under a different pen name. Curse of Blood and Wolves was a Fairy Loot pick in the Romantasy subscription when I had it last year, and I didn't like that book. I didn't like the writing, so I feel like I know what to expect with this author's writing. Obviously the other book that I've read was a paranormal romance, but I don't think I'm gonna like this series. If you have read any of these nominees, then please obviously let me know if there's any that you would recommend. I have read Anna Huang's other series, the Twisted series, which I think is connected to this other series, but I'm not really sure, and I would be open to reading more Anna Huang. Next up we have Romantasy, and again I've read 3 books in this category, Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, which is one of my favourite books of the year. However, is it really a romantasy? I could go on a whole rant about this category. For me, romantasy isn't a genre, it's a genre blend. It's a way of saying this book has romance and fantasy. Publishers don't care what the split is. They don't care whether it's more romantic or whether it's more fantastical. If they think the book is going to sell better with the romantasy label, then it's getting that label. So we end up with a category that is just so mixed. A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping and Mate, I personally think should be in the romance category because they are romance forward and they just so happen to have paranormal elements. Alchemized and The Night and the Moth have both been labelled as romantasy, but I received them through the Fairy Loot fantasy subscription. Onyx Storm I think is going to win it. I haven't continued the Fourth Wing series past the first book. I have heard really mixed things about the sequel, so I'm still on the fence about it. My vote, the thing is, it should be The Songbird and the Heartstone, which was Carissa Broadbent's release last year. I really enjoyed that. I think it's one of my favourite books of the year last year, and I gave it 4.5 stars. But I didn't like the sequel, which I read a few months ago. Gave the sequel 2 stars, so I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I should give it to A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, even though I don't agree with it being in this category, or I might vote for Accomplice to the Villain because I really like that series. I know that it's very hit or miss, but I think it's a really fun, cozy romantasy. If Shrek were a romantasy, basically, that's the vibe that you can expect. I am annoyed that that's not the last book in the series though. I got to the end and realised that there's going to be a 4th book. Next up we have the fantasy category, and this is an easy vote for me. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab is one of my favourite books of the year. I loved it. It's sapphic, it has vampires, and I loved how you could feel how much effort had gone into crafting the story. It really takes its time and it just feels very deliberately written. I loved every single minute of reading it, and that is going to be what I'm going to be voting for. I've also read Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldry. That is a really cozy fantasy, but with a hint of adventure. It does have a slightly different vibe to the other books in this series, but yeah, yeah, that was like a solid 4 to 4.5 stars for me. And then Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, I didn't like, I gave it 2 stars. Alchemy of Secrets, I do have on my TBR because I received it through the Fairy Loot Fantasy subscription, which I am thinking about cancelling, even though I've enjoyed some of the books. I mean, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, I think I got through that subscription, but I would have probably read it anyway. I feel like I'm not loving the picks for the fantasy subscription, so yeah, I am thinking about cancelling as soon as I run out of skips, but Bury Our Bones is going to get my vote, and I think that could win it, or maybe Brandon Sanderson, because those have the most ratings and both are popular authors, so I think even people who haven't read those specific books might end up voting for them. Next up we have a bunch of categories where I've read the one book, and first up is science fiction. I read The Poppy Fields by Nikki Ehrlich, and this was a little bit disappointing. I think I gave it 3 stars. The Measure by this author was one of my favourite books of last year, but The Poppy Fields, I think it was trying too much to push this found family vibe, and I just wasn't buying it. The characters only know each other for a few days and suddenly they're talking about having an amazing connection, and I just thought, no, it doesn't make sense. It has some interesting twists and turns and some interesting commentary, but also I've read other books that have better commentary on grief, so it was a very middle of the road 3 stars, but I would be open to reading more by this author. There's a couple of books in this category that are on my TBR. Death of the Author, I've heard really good things about. I think that's a book within a book, or it's about an author. I mean, it's in the title, isn't it? So that's probably right. And then The Compound, I thought was more of a thriller, but again, I've heard mixed things about it. I know that it's a reality TV show type story. I think it's about these contestants that are taking part in this Love Island type show, and it just sounds very interesting. So I'm intrigued about that one. The Merge, I have never heard of, and it only has 246 ratings, but it sounds really interesting. It's a dystopian where a controversial procedure, can't say that word, has been developed in which 2 people's consciousnesses can be combined into one body, and yeah, it just, from the synopsis, it sounds really intriguing. In terms of who I think is going to win this category, The Dream Hotel was nominated for the Women's Prize, so I feel like it might have that recognition, or maybe Adrian Tchaikovsky, as he's a pretty popular sci-fi author. I didn't think I would have read anything in the horror category, but I have read Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I read that, again, I think back in January, and I enjoyed it. I don't think I'm interested in reading anything else by this author. I have a feeling that Grady Hendrix's type of horror just isn't for me. So many of these are on my TBR. I really want to read more from Stephen Graham Jones, and I've heard great things about Buffalo Hunter Hunter. Bat Eater, I've heard very good things about. Rachel Harrison, I really want to try because I know her books are super popular, and I feel like I could really like the types of stories that she's writing. Stephen King has been nominated in this category, and he tends to attract a lot of votes because of name recognition, but I think Witchcraft for Wayward Girls could win it. I feel like Grady Hendrix has grown in popularity over the last few years, and I think this would be a worthy winner. I thought that it was really good. Next up we have historical fiction, and the one book that I've read in this category is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I think is also going to win it just because of how popular Taylor Jenkins Reid is. I do have a whole video on my channel where I've ranked Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, and this is in my top 3. I think it's really strong. I think that the main character is someone that you can really root for. It's set in the 1970s or 80s. I think it's set during the 1980s actually, and it follows a main character who's one of the first women accepted onto NASA's space shuttle program. It put me through so many emotions. I sobbed, and I just loved how this showed the pressure that these women were feeling, how they felt responsible for paving the way for future generations. I just thought it was very well written. I would have loved for this to have been longer. Next up in the fiction category, I have again read one book. I've read My Friends by Frederick Backman, which I think is going to win. It has the most ratings by far, and Anxious People almost won in 2020. It came second to The Midnight Library by less than 10 votes. So Frederick Backman, very popular author, one of my favourite authors. This one isn't my favourite by him. I think it was probably because I listened to the audiobook. I've actually, we're going to talk about this in a bit, My Friends is nominated in the audiobook category, and I don't understand it because I don't think the audiobook was anything particularly special. Sometimes I think he tries too hard to misdirect the reader and then be like, surprise, you made this assumption, when actually this is what you should have thought. And it just, yeah. I've read a few of his books now, and I think he does certain things too often that I can now recognise when it's happening, but I still thought this was solid. It's about a teenage girl who has grown up in foster care with an obsession with this painting. You then also get the backstory of the artist who painted this painting and his friends, hence why it's called My Friends. And yeah, it was good. I think I gave it 4 stars. On my TBR, I have quite a few books. I would really like to check out Cursed Daughters by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I read My Sister the Serial Killer by this author years ago, way before I ever started my booktube channel. Wild Dark Shore I've also heard really good things about, and The Girls Who Grew Big is by the author of Nightcrawling, which I heard good things about. I think that was nominated for a few awards. So this tends to be the category that I build a TBR from. Quite often I haven't read any of the nominees. It's a surprise that I've read one this year, but I end up looking through the list and thinking, oh yeah, some of these sound really, really good. In the non-fiction category, I have read The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates, which I'm more than happy to vote for because this was fantastic. It made me feel so angry. If you've read Anibot by Sierra Greer and you really appreciated the themes in that, even if you didn't like the book, I would recommend picking up The New Age of Sexism because it tackles similar themes, but obviously it's a non-fiction book. One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, I've heard amazing things about. That's the main non-fiction book on this list that I'm interested in picking up. I think the winner could be the John Green Everything is Tuberculosis. I feel like that's had quite a high readership and John Green has that name recognition. The Let Them theory, I keep seeing in Waterstones. I don't know anything about it, but from the little research that I've done, I've heard this is quite controversial, but it has a lot of ratings, so potentially that is going to be the winner. The last category that I've read a book from is Memoir. I read The House of My Mother by Shari Frankie a few months ago, and I listened to the audiobook again because that's how I prefer to consume non-fiction, especially when it's narrated by the author, and Shari Frankie does a really great job. Shari's mum was a very popular family YouTuber until she was arrested for child abuse. I hadn't heard anything about this case before I read the book, other than, you know, like I've heard people talking about this book, and that's why I was interested in reading it. Careless People has the most ratings. I think this is the one that's going to win, unless are people more likely to vote for a celebrity memoir? I'm not sure, but I know that Careless People is about Sarah Wynne Williams's experience as the global public policy director at Meta. They took her to court to stop her from promoting it, which is why I'm kind of interested in it. So those are all of the books that I've read. I have also read 2 books from the audiobook category. I wouldn't say that either of them are like the best audiobook that I've listened to this year. They were both fine. I think that Atmosphere could win this one because I have heard that Atmosphere is a very good audiobook. Is that narrated by Julia Whelan as well? I feel like it is. Julia Whelan is, I might have said this already, she's one of my favourite audiobook narrators, and I think she narrated Atmosphere. I think she narrates all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, which is how I first heard of her. The 3 categories that I've not read anything from are debut novel, YA fantasy, and YA fiction. Debut novel I'm a little surprised at, but also not really. I tend to prioritise either backlist books or new releases by authors that I've read from and enjoyed in the past. YA, it's not really a surprise. I don't tend to read that much YA anymore, and when I do, I tend to pick up backlist books. That just about wraps things up for this video, so thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments any of your thoughts and feelings on the nominees this year. Let me know which books you're going to be voting for and how much you've read in each category. Let me know which category have you read the most from, or which category are you most interested in reading the nominees from. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye.